It is November 8th, 2022, and the midterms are happening now. And I am from Canada. Now, why does somebody from Canada know so much about the US midterms? Is because the United States is the world reserve currency. And what happens to the United States happens to the rest of the world. Canada is like a cousin of the United States. And whatever happens there happens in Canada, usually 6 weeks later. We are not a services based economy like the United States is, and a financial hub. But Canada provides a lot of natural resources, so we pay a lot close attention to that. And from an economic standpoint, we got to pay attention to that as well. Now, for a lot of people who are not in the United States, we have to ask ourselves, what are the midterms? We're going to cover that just very briefly for you guys now. To our American friends, please forgive me if I did something wrong here. But the United States midterm elections happens every 4 years, but it's off on those years when it comes to what we all see on the rest of the world is the presidential election. So you'll have the presidential election 2 years later, midterms, 2 years later, president, 2 years later, midterms, so forth. So midterm is what it means, the midterm of the United States presidential thing. So here, 34 to 50 states elects their governors on 4 year terms. So this is very, very similar to Commonwealth countries and to so forth. They have governors of the different states or provinces that they're in. So that is going to be happening. In addition to that, is where they are going to be electing the House. And so the House and the Senate, there's going to be a lot of that. Now, if we just go look underneath the midterms, I found that this chart was interesting all the way back to George Washington. If you look back all the way, it ping pongs back and forth, Democratic, Republican, and this has all of the different ones like the presidential, the House, and the Senate. And you could see as we go through time, yes, they may have a couple consecutive terms, but over time, ping pong, back and forth, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. Now, we're going to get back to this later, but as you know, it just kind of goes back and forth very, very often, back and forth. But there are periods right here. If you look from 1950 all the way to 1990, that's a long time for the Democrats to control the House. That's a very, very, very long time. So there are some, but over time, I'm saying it goes back and forth between the two, especially for presidents. They don't ever last as long as the House does, for example, in those long, long runs. Now, how do stocks behave during this time? So on November 8th, all 435 seats of the U.S. House of Representatives will be up for grabs and 35 Senate seats out of the 100. So this is the largest day for elections, for the importance, for the number of people that have to get elected on that day. So we're going to be seeing that coming up right now. Now, it says if Republicans win control of just one congressional body, this should prevent material changes for the next 2 years. So what does that mean? Remember, there are different branches of government. They call it the three arms of government. But if one of them doesn't agree, all three of them kind of have to agree to get laws passed and to get things moving. So when one doesn't agree and it is controlled by the other house, no matter which side it is, not a lot of stuff can get done. So you can sit back and go, wow, that sounds pretty terrible. If nothing can get done for 2 years, it's like down the drain. So how does the market react to something like that? And the political gridlock has been historically benefited equity investors, averaging annual gains with a range of 13%. 13%. Though counterintuitive, equity markets tend to prefer a divided government. Now, that is a real head scratcher, right? So if you can get nothing done and just continue on with business as usual, with all the loopholes and games that are played, the economy loves that. It's just crazy, right? You would think that if they could find out that they can get work done, they'd be happier with that. But nope, complete opposite. All right, let's head back in. I find it's very interesting. If you guys find this interesting, leave me some messages below. I was wondering if I had any more notes on that. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Since 1950, the average return of the S&P 500 in the 12 months after the midterm election is 15%. surprisingly with no down years. Can you read that again? For the past 70 years, after midterms, there is a 15% bump. In 17 of the 19 midterms since 1946, stocks performed better in the 6 months following the election than they did leading up to it. Wow. So this is very weird, right? So we're saying that after midterms, which is not the presidential election, after that was midterms, when they elect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, that the stock markets always take off. And they like it when all three branches of power are divided and infighting. It just scratches your head a little bit, right? I find that's crazy. Now, when we read this right here, that they've always gone up in the past 12 months with no down years, and 17 to 19% of the midterms, they had a better 6 months after than leading up. Now, I understand why, because beforehand, everybody's afraid to do anything before the elections to push anything forward. What they're really trying to do is to give away some extra money to buy those votes, right? Regardless of what party it is. So this happens all the time, but there's always that impasse afterward. Now, are we saying that I suspect that the markets are going to do a lot better after this midterms? Maybe in the short term, but not in the long term. Imagine if you had a large telescope and you're looking at one spot on the horizon, and I asked you how the weather is. You wouldn't continue looking through that little spot in your telescope. You would be looking around and looking at the big picture. And this is the same thing, is we don't want to look at this one moment in time. Yes, statistics are good for us in the past 70 years, blah, 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 but this is different. We are at massive swings, huge amount of debt, and a recession that we are in that nobody wants to admit to. We have some big, big problems. So though there may be some short-term gain, if any, there's going to be a really rocky 12 months that we're leading up to. I'm quite sure of it. Let me know if you guys think the same thing. So if we go and look at this, this is what they call the three branches of the U.S. Constitution. Some people call it four, but they colloquially call it three, because the U.S. Capitol, when they say legislative, this is the House of Representatives, the 435 people that they're voting today, and the Senate has 100 people. What everyone else from everywhere sees on TV is always the election of the president. And so everybody takes that really, really seriously, of course, voting in Supreme Court justices. And so when a lot of things can happen all together is where all of these four, the House, the Senate, White House, and Supreme Court, is all controlled by one political party, regardless of which one it is. So that's when they get usually and bulldoze, they can push legislation through. When only some of them are by one party and some on the other. So when they're split, maybe the Supreme Court would be Republican, and the executive could be that the Democrat, which is a liberal side, left side. If they're split, then they have to work together to get better deals, you know. So here is the thing: is we've seen this. I've seen this my whole life. You know, the Congress is 435 people, so you just have to have a majority. That's what everybody is hoping for in the Republican side. Let's see how that works out. Now, if you get up to the Senate is the higher house. There's only 100, as you can see here on Wikipedia. The House of the Senate has a lot less desks. These are actually very famous desks. They're the same desks since the actual Senate has been there. I think that's pretty cool. And then that big branch, this is the impending view there of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, guys, when we're talking about this, I know what the results are going to be. David, how can you say that? This is the thing. Politics can really pull at your heartstrings because you have a feeling one way or another, left, right, whatever it is, for whatever your causes are. I can tell you, though, that all the way back, going back to the Rothschilds, they would open a bank. And those banks would fund both sides of the wars, two different governments, the British and the French, and fight together. And they made deals on each side so they could still make money. Remember, there's a lot of fighting that goes on between what they would call the blue and the red. So that would be the Republican and the liberal, or the Democrat in the States. In Canada, it'd be conservative and liberal. And they're also use that blue and red. So it's not a fight between the colors. But guess what? If you just follow the green, follow the money, you're going to see that they can use politics to bend whatever they want. And it's dictated in large part by companies. Now, let's refer back to this chart that I showed you right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, when I was telling you this chart is interesting to me, all the way back to George Washington, 1790, we can see that that goes back and forth, Democratic, Republican, Democratic, Republican over time. Though we think that it feels like a long time when we're living in it, when we look back in history, we can see it ping pong back and forth all the time. Now, here is why I know what the results will be. This right here is the national debt of the United States. If we check that out, it just goes up and up and up and up and up and up nonstop. And it doesn't even go up in a straight line. It goes parabolic, going straight up, especially since 2022. They really, really took off. That, guys, is quite embarrassing. Now, this is the United States. That we're not picking on the United States. Canada is the exact same way. Europe is the exact same way. Japan, Australia, they all did it. I always say, I think they're always on the same WhatsApp group, print money now. I think that's what they're doing. But here is the end of the day. Inflation is going to continue. Money printing is going to continue either way. That's who is going to win. The wealth gap has been getting larger and larger and larger ever since the Second World War. After the Second World War, all countries had no debts. And then everybody was very eager to vote themselves a lot of benefits, right, that they would never have to pay back. And people are the same way now. I would argue a lot worse. So the need to continue spending is continuing. So sometimes it feels like there's so much about elections, one party versus the other, and we can get caught up with it. But I hope that just a fraction of people would spend a fraction of the time that they spend studying politics to educate themselves with financial literacy. It's going straight up the debt. We have to understand how money works. The system is made to keep people paying forever. So we have to learn a lot about financial literacy to be able to teach us so that we can create not just wealth for ourselves, but wealth for our families. And because at the end of the day, all we want to do is be able to take care of our families and spend time with our loved ones. Would you agree? And I think that moving forward, it doesn't matter the country. We've seen this polarity between the left and the right just spreading out farther and farther. Liberal centric governments have become ultra liberal, and then the conservatives have become ultra conservative, and there's very few people in the center. We got to work together, right? And I think if we work together, we're going to do a lot better. But even if we work together politically, remember the banks, the big money of the world, and a lot of authoritarian groups that are out there that are trying to gain control of world populations. When we think of that, even if we did in the small picture between our governments, there's still the massive institutions around the world, like the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, which you see in the news all the time, the Bank of International Settlements. These guys direct their policy to all these other countries. So remember, we kind of got to work together, you guys. All we want as humans is pretty simple, right? We want good shelter. We want food. We want to have fun, time with our family, everybody to be safe. No matter who we are, we can bridge those gaps a lot easier if we work together. Wars never work out good for anybody. So we have a hot war going on right now in Russia, Ukraine. We also have inflationary pressures everywhere. We have food shortages everywhere, energy shortages everywhere. And so it doesn't matter what country, we all need to eat. We all need shelter. We all need that. So this is my plea to everybody. Let's try to work together. Let's work through some of our problems because we can do it. We've been through a lot worse. I want you to go home, give your family a hug, and let's take care of each other. Wish you the best, guys. I'll talk to you on the next video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you like that video, you might like this one and maybe something like that.